Welcome everybody. My name is Susie O'Brien and I am, along with Daniel Coleman, the co-organizer of this conference called Narratives of Sustenance in Broken Times. And I am delighted to welcome to smoky Hamilton all of you who've come from Europe or smoky Western Canada. And welcome too to CCENA members and guests who have come a much shorter distance in the smoke. So it's my job tonight to say a little bit about this event and the people involved before Daniel introduces our first panel of speakers. First of all, it is our practice in this country, currently known as Canada, to begin events like these with a land acknowledgement. And so, using the words of the McMaster land acknowledgement that were crafted with great care and some ambivalence by some of Daniel's and my Indigenous colleagues, I acknowledge that McMaster University and the site where we're holding this event is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and the Haudenosaunee nations within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. While it risks being a kind of an empty gesture by settler institutions, the land acknowledgement can be an important occasion for reflection on the land, air, and water that sustains us all and our relationship to it. The Dish with One Spoon, as I think many of you know, refers to the watershed we live in. The dish is the watershed, and the obligation to live well in it, to take only what we need, to leave some for others, and to keep the dish clean. And of course, the shared spoon is importantly not a knife. It speaks to the responsibility to maintain the peace. It's such an evocative image for thinking about how to live ethically together in this place. But more than that, it's a covenant that was made first between Haudenosaunee, Mississauga, and Anishinaabe nations, and then extended to other Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers who have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And we settlers have not done a good job of upholding this treaty. So when we think about the land acknowledgement, it's crucial to remember this broad social and political aspect and its context in the ongoing coloniality of this country. And the structure of colonialism has particular significance for those of us that work in the university, and particularly in English departments, because as we know, English literature and language played a very large role in colonialism. So we face, and we in our Department of English and Cultural Studies feel a particular responsibility to learn about the history of this place, including land claims that are currently being defended just down the road from us, near Caledonia. And we continue to press our institutions and governments to uphold treaties and to enact the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. Tomorrow morning, 3 of our Indigenous colleagues will be presenting their own work on subjects related to our conference themes, and also inviting consideration for how non-Indigenous scholars can work ethically with Indigenous materials. Before I turn things over to Daniel, just a few quick words about this event, which is organized around the work of the ReShap Group, an international research team of literature and cultural studies scholars funded by the Spanish Ministry of Science and Innovation and led by Ana Maria Fraile Marcos at the Salamanca University and Eva Darius Botel from La Laguna University. The ReShap Group is engaged in an intensive critical investigation of the valorization of the ideas of resilience and happiness as public virtues, especially in the context of the COVID pandemic, climate change, ongoing colonialism, and political polarization, and how these rhetorical virtues are celebrated and or contested in literary and cultural narratives. So this is the third of 4 workshop conferences in which members of our group share our work in progress. The shape of this meeting over the next couple of days takes up questions and ideas that arose in our last meeting, including the need to extend beyond the kinds of scholarly debates that we've been having by consulting with community-based artists and writers about alternatives to widespread rhetorics of happiness or resilience. We'll say more about the other panels later in the next couple of days. Daniel is going to introduce our panel of CCENA speakers, but the very last thing I'm going to do is to just express thanks to the organizations and the people who helped to make this event happen. The John Douglas Taylor family, whose generous donation supports annual conferences in the Department of English and Cultural Studies. The Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, who provided crucial funding. And then closer to home, thanks are due to Alona Forgo-Smith and Sophie Gelnisch, who work in the Department of English and Cultural Studies. Thank you to Wendy Coleman for gathering and curating mementos. And then last but not least, Janice Viz, who has taken care of details big and small and who most of you will have communicated with. With that, I will turn things over to Daniel to introduce this panel.
Thanks, Susie, and I'm so excited to have you all here, and we've had these meetings over the years in Salamanca and last year in La Laguna, and it's just, I love what Anna and Ava have pulled together in this group where we kind of do practical work instead of just presenting. You know, so often academic conferences can be a presentation, you listen to somebody, you know, talk, very dense, critical article to you, and you are trying to make sure you understood what was said, and then if they get a comment or two, maybe they do afterwards. But these workshops have been amazing because it gives people time to actually sit and talk with each other about the work that they're doing while it's in development. And I think it's a brilliant, brilliant initiative that you put together, and thank you for being willing to come here and share that with us. And I also feel this huge gratitude for bringing together communities that matter a lot to me in my own life and exploration. And Susie was calling the group that are with us here our CCENA partners, but to just explain to people who are new, at McMaster there's a center called the Center for Community Engaged Narrative Arts. And what we do is we work with community groups who are interested in telling their story their way, whatever way that is. So we call it narrative arts because we didn't know what else to call it. Storytelling, poetry, music, art, whatever it was. Ways that people want to give words to their angle or slice of life. And we kind of feel that narrative has this capacity to be the glue of community, to create a sense of community and to enable people to feel community, and often communities that haven't had a chance to have their narratives seen as in the foreground. There's lots of official narratives of any given city that often can be pretty marginalizing and excluding for people who have stories of their communities and their ways of being in the world. And so we've been so fortunate over the last 6 years to partner with, now I think it's over 40 different community group projects where people are telling whatever story their way. And so we have some of the people that we've had a chance to work with over the past number of years with us tonight. And one of the things that makes me feel like there's a deep resonance is that the folks who are working in our communities to develop stories and so on are workshopping in that sense their own ideas, their own ways of conveying their narratives, building community with each other about how to convey stories that are of importance to their part of society or the part of the world that they live in. And so we're really grateful that some of the folks that we've had a chance to work with over the years have agreed to come and share their experiences with us all tonight. And then we can maybe talk about things, because you kind of, you know how in your own sphere, you develop a kind of vocabulary and a rhetoric and a set of expectations of how do you talk about this topic. Let's say resilience in these times, or scripts about happiness and keeping in good spirits in difficult times and so on. We get these languages for these things perhaps in our own circuits, but there are different circuits that people operate in, and they're working out these kinds of questions and concerns in different domains. And so I'm really grateful to all of you. These are friends of mine at the front of the room who do amazing work in our city, in our larger community, that I'm really grateful that all of you have been willing to share from the work that you do. So just to give you a sense of who's in the room, maybe those of you in the panel would like to know, well, who's around here? So could we just quickly, I know we don't want to take a lot of time to introduce ourselves, but can you just say your name and where you're from so that we can go around the room a little bit, and then I'll introduce the panel and then they can have some idea of who is here. So let's start over here.
Hi everyone, my name is Seth Taylor. I'm at U of T right now and I live in Toronto.
And just let's go around the tables. So.
Hi, my name is Claudia Miller. I'm a PhD student at the University of La Laguna.
Hi everyone, my name is Delia and I'm also a PhD student at the University of Salamanca in Spain.
Hi everyone, my name is Lucia. I'm also from Spain. I'm a PhD student at the University of Salamanca.
Hi, I'm Sarah and I'm working at the University of Salamanca as well.
Hi, I'm Lydia and I'm a recent doctor from the University of Salamanca.
Hi, I'm Susie. I'm a lecturer at the University of La Laguna.
Guess we're coming up to this table here in the middle.
Okay, I'm Eva Darius Botel from the University of La Laguna, which is in the Canary Islands, and we belong to Spain.
Hi, my name is Maria Jesus Hernay, and I teach at the University of La Rioja in Spain, which is in the north of Spain, roughly.
Okay, so I'm Ana Fraile. I teach at the University of Salamanca in Spain, close to Portugal. Locating ourselves. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you all for being here too.
And I guess the table back here.
I'm Aretha Van Herk. I'm a professor of creative writing and Canadian culture at the University of Calgary, which is in Alberta, the worst province in Canada. And I escaped. I haven't brought the contagion with me.
We've got plenty of contagion of our own.
I understand that.
Wendy Guest, retired educator.
And I think you've already been introduced to Janice and Susie's had some words. So on this end of the group of panelists, we have folks from Keeping Six, and I'll ask Kelly to introduce the group in a minute. And then sitting beside, and Keeping Six is a group that generates storytelling and so on in a dignified way amongst people who have drug users and who have been in the city for a long time. And then passing on to Klyde, who is the dub poet extraordinary of Hamilton, host of Poemagic, open mic series for many years, done lots of poem in the street work in our city for a long, long time. Beside Klyde is Aaron Parry. And by the way, feel free to give more elaborate background on who you are. I'm just giving the skim. Aaron Parry works as liaison, black community liaison person in a high school, Catholic high school in the city. But I met Aaron at the university, but also through doing work on what grew into a Black History database in the city that we did in conjunction with the Hamilton Black History Council. And beside Aaron is Ashley Marshall, who I met many years ago at McMaster, now a professor of communications at Durham College, way on the other side of Toronto. Ashley's been an inspiration in the way that she thinks about story and elaborating theory, walking theory in the cities in which she lives. I'm so interested to hear what Ashley has to say for us tonight. So thank you all for joining us. We're really honored that you would come and take time out of your schedules, drive 3 hours across the big smoky city. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I know that some of our friends from Keeping Six have a little schedule challenge tonight to get out a little bit sooner. So if we can open with you folks. If each of our panelists can just speak, if it's okay if we just go along and speak each group for 10 minutes, and then that'll give us a chance to chat with everybody after everybody's had a chance to speak. Is that all right if we proceed that way? Okay, I'll pass it over to you, Kelly.
So I'm Kelly Wolf, and so I am formerly the arts coordinator for Keeping Six. Keeping Six is a grassroots harm reduction organization that is peer-led, and it's very important that that peer aspect, because a lot of that harm reduction, if it's led from a medical point of view, can be harmful. Again, it continues the harm in a medical situation, so peers are a really important part of that work. And that's why I'm super pleased to have Marie and Jody here. Marie is the current arts coordinator, so I was the coordinator for a year. And we built that entity, and to the point where it's like, okay, let's get Marie to take that over. And Jody, who is one of the original members of Keeping Six, started it, and you can tell when we started it in a minute, because I can't remember the dates of that. But I met Jody in 2019. I'm a theater artist, that's my background, and I was looking for ways to authentically connect with people who have lived experience of drug use or homelessness in a way, because I wanted to create theater productions that are performances that would engage people from the community in a way that I felt was going to be authentic and not going to be, retelling those harms over and over again, right? So I started going to Keeping Six meetings, and that was 2019, and so not very long afterwards, the pandemic happened, and I began joining in on the outreach, because we knew really quickly we needed to have harm reduction and food, and I was like, can we bring art and writing supplies out with us? And I felt a little bit kind of like nervous, because I thought it's not really essential. Like, I think maybe other people don't think it's essential, but you all probably will think this is essential. Of course, telling stories, writing your story down is essential. And so we brought it out, and we started sharing, and it expanded to, during the pandemic, we had areas called resting and hygiene centers where people who were unhoused could go and spend some time, get warmed up or cool down, get some food, get harm reduction, and art supplies if they wanted to. And so that really grew. And like for me, when I was thinking about the idea of sustenance, it became an element of sustenance for me as well, because I felt like throughout the pandemic, the way that I felt to be of use, to be of service, doing something tangible with my hands. I'm an active person, and so many other theater people I knew were really struggling with their sense of identity and what they were supposed to be doing. But 3 times a week, I was out talking to people and having real conversations, and so that was really important to me. So as far as originally I was there because we kind of connected on the idea of creating a zine, and so that's an ongoing thing, and I can share information about how to access our zine afterwards. But that's how we connected with the writing of the zine, and it's how CCENA has supported with, we had our writing contest. We had Klyde, who was also one of the jurors on that. And so sure, I originally came thinking, oh yeah, I have something I can offer, but equally, the exchange becomes, shared, because it was like, I throughout that whole time, and why I still stick around too is because I love hanging out with Keeping Six, and it's not my lived experience. And so for me, I feel like, okay, what can I learn every time? And so the sustaining part for me was how I made it through the pandemic, feeling useful, meeting new people, having real conversations. And so I feel like I'm going to turn it, is it okay if I pass it to Marie just in case? Because Marie's the one that has to head out early. But and I know So, and then we'll come back to you because you'll have lots to say as well. So that's just a little, I wanted to give more time to Marie and to Jody as well, so.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm Marie and I have been introduced, so I'll just dive into it. For an opening statement, I just want to say that I have frustration with resilience, that it's something people have, I'm frustrated that resilient is something that people have to keep being, but I'm also grateful that resilience kept me going until I was able to find my own recovery. It's not all bad. The system is broken, and yet here I am, sober and clean, and it was a lot of work. So I'll say a little bit about my personal experience with resilience and how that leads to the work that I do now as the arts coordinator for Keeping Sites. After years of illness, focused treatment, and stigma from society and medical professionals, I internalized these reflections of others' perceptions of me. That was game over. Trapped in a cycle of addiction that originated from the desperation of self-medicating, my dignity crashed and crumbled into nothingness. This is where I experienced spiritual death. The purgatory of I cannot live without my addiction and I cannot live with is the suffering that took me to my darkest places. Places I didn't stay, by the grace of God. My healing was complex, key points involving responsibility, willingness. At the trauma-based treatment center I attended, I learned the acronym SEEDS, standing for the things that heal our brain from the trauma of addiction, the trauma of childhood, the trauma of motherhood. The acronym stands for sleep, exercise, education, diet, and socialization. You can see how creative practice can fall into 2 of these categories, even 3 if lunch is provided, 4 if dance and movement is encouraged. When you start from scratch at 27, you have no clue who you are, but some things have stuck with me. The things people say to you is writing on your wall, and I had writing on my wall from a youth outreach art studio where I had spent many hours before I was swept up in the journey of motherhood, and with it my inevitable decline. I had writing on my wall that I was artistic, and this was an island that I seized. In that first year, my brain was on red alert, signals constantly misfiring. My fight or flight was triggered hourly, daily. I wasn't in danger anymore, but my body didn't know that. I had to hold it like a little girl, like the little girl I had inside, and lead it with me back to safety. How did I do that? I did it with art and with writing. Pen, paint, arms, paper, scratching, gliding, molding. A counselor told me that creativity was a sign of spiritual rebirth. I grew stronger and a fire burned inside me. I was safe and I wanted to be heard. I wanted to share and I wanted to give. I still freeze in conversation. I make lists because my short-term memory still has gaps. I've seen improvements, but mostly I've learned how to problem solve and use strategies to work with the brain I have. In writing, my voice is strong and still growing. I have been saved and set free by art. It's given me identity, purpose, and healing. How beautiful is it that the work I do today allows me to participate in art, coordinating a collective that's main purpose is to make creativity accessible to all. And on outreach last Sunday, I handed out little art kits. I didn't know people's eyes would light up when I offered them. A gentleman came back and found us at the end of our route. He passed us a beautiful piece of artwork he had created with pen and paper from the writing kit he had received. Written beside his art piece was the word thanks. There is such beauty to be shared amidst the broken.
Well, if it's my turn to go, or just, I don't know if it's a half of an apology, I'm just going to speak off the cuff if you don't mind. I don't have anything particular to say. I just wanted to hear what people said, even in introductions. And one thing that I think really gets to the core of the matter is something you brought up, is what we value as a society has got to change. We ultimately have to value people, and there's got to be other modalities instead of just hoarding of money and value that is just held in banks and somewhere. There's got to be value in people and in people living well. We have enough for everyone. It doesn't mean we have to have a pure socialist system, but we have enough for everyone. Let's find a way to work at it. And that's the kind of narratives that, to bring it to a narrative kind of structure. The whole of society is, in a sense, you guys are all the ones with the PhDs and stuff, not me, but I see it as, I've heard this for a long time, that the idea of mythos is like the stories that we tell, and the culture is the background structure that holds us all together. So what we're doing in our work right now is trying to take, because there's the downside of people and their story, unfortunately, when you're talking about drug abuse and homelessness, is that people's story becomes a story of all the horrible things that have happened. And you can't get away from that. You can't just say, oh, let's skip past that. There's no way you want to get through that in a healthy way. Or not through it, but you want to work through it in a way that they can accept it, and it's not just a cyclical thing that's who that person is. We want to get, because originally saw the zine as a little more fictionally focused, and I realized we had a lot of these personal stories, and I realized just as quickly, we can't discount these personal stories. We can't, that's the importance, but as well, I didn't want to be like, I don't know how familiar anyone is with AA or NA, but it becomes my story and all the bad happens to be a little bit too much focus, and I want to go from there to an arts as healing modality, because there's always healing in even whether you have a trained arts therapy specialist, just the fact of creating art puts the mind in a different mindset where different things can happen, different ideas and different pathways and different ways of thinking can occur. And we have always been a group that we are looking to our own people for solutions. We're not looking for the higher ups to tell us what to do. We're a grassroots organization that grew out of just a few people, and it's growing. Sometimes it almost seems too big. It's out of control. Our group is probably maybe the size of this room and a little bit bigger all told. We're not all here today, obviously, but I don't know. I just want to say that I just want to leave on the fact that this is an idea to think on, because this is far and far in time from the Dark Ages, but back in there used to be the landlord and the fiefdoms and the small little strips of land people used to farm. And we think that we're so far beyond and so far of a different society from that way of being, yet there's still the haves and the have-nots, and that the division between is very difficult to jump from the one to the other. It's extremely difficult to go from having nothing to having something. And everybody who is so happy when the price of their house goes up is crazy, because if you sell it, where are you going to live? You have to buy something. So the idea of housing prices and everything going up only affords more value and richness to the super rich, not the middle class, definitely not the lower class. So we just have to look at who we're taking our cues from and what we value in society. And that's probably about it for me.
And then if anybody else has comments or questions that you'd like to ask.
I have a question about your name. Sorry, you may have said it and I may have missed it, but Keeping Six.
Oh, Keeping Six.
Yeah.
So Keeping Six, he's got a nice shirt.
So it's a Keeping Six. The feet apart is just referencing for the pandemic. It just happened that it was 6 feet apart, but keeping 6 is a term meaning watch your back. And it's people generally say keep 6, which means watch my back. So we're keeping 6 instead of keep 6, as in we wanted it to be a collective, ongoing group that we collectively watch each other's backs. It's a grassroots collection that we all help each other. We don't look towards police or other systems of power or the authority to help or fix anything for us. We're trying to be a collective, how do you say that, Kelly? Sorry, I lost my words. I lost my words for a moment, but basically,
accountability is that?
No, there's a specific term for collective helping.
Mutual aid.
Mutual aid.
Yeah.
Yeah, mutual aid within a group instead of looking outwards for a system to help you. It's mutual aid of people and getting to know people. Yeah.
Yeah, you can find we have our quarterly zine. Is if you go to keeping6.org/zine, ZINE, you can find all the zines that we've published are there, and as Jody said, they're a mixture of stories of people, like real stories, there's poetry and artwork, and we also see it as advocacy, because my desire is to kind of slip it into hands of people who have no idea what's going on out there and go, oh, this is like, I didn't know, or to be amazed at how the stories might resonate and you might have never thought, oh, I've experienced that.
Yeah.
That's you had
and
that
some of it,
yeah.
we're asking questions of the group of people, and sometimes we're giving information because during the pandemic and stuff, we were at there was encampments started within Hamilton as well as all over Canada and as other places as well. So we had a ongoing legal issue with the city that we were working on. That we had an encampment protocol in place and then they said, oh, the pandemic's over, so we'll just throw that out the window too. And it was just like we had a whole system that we worked on for a year and a half or something in court, and they just felt well enough to throw it out. So that's her.
Yeah, so it was a way to share news amongst folks in the encampments. To share it outside, but also when people would get the copy and they would see their work in there and they'd be, can I have another copy? I want to give that one to my friend, or I want to give it to my mom, or whatever, you know? And it's just
I've heard that from other people as well, like that they've said that having, reading other people's work is one thing, having your own work in there and on paper, even though it's just a local zine, it empowers people, like, here's my story, I kind of made, like, check it out, it gives people like a little boost that, hey, you are something, you are somebody that worthy of somebody else hearing your story, and it gives people a little boost.
I have a question for Marie. Do you feel that the path starts to get all right, not only after you've created the path of recovery for yourself, but when you start thinking of others and helping others go through things that are similar to the ones that you've gone through, that it's only at that time, however difficult it might have been at the very beginning, when you start to give yourself to others, do you think that that is when really, you feel completed?
I think that I didn't have anything to give at the very beginning. I was a dry well, so I had to develop a foundation of self, so that, and then the giving came as I was able to be somebody who was accountable and could love. It wasn't born from selfishness. So the giving was part of it, yeah. But it came later.
And it wouldn't have been sufficient just for the first part? Or did you really need the other part? Like, first it was yourself. That, however difficult that might have been, but that you needed the other part?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it came out of you. It wasn't kind of pressure from, I don't know, your friends or the organization or anything that you needed to become more of who you are, to kind of, I don't know, help others through your own creativity or your ideas or whatever.
I think that it comes from gratitude. It comes from gratitude.
I don't know if it's exactly it's spot on for your question, but just to clarify, Keeping Six is a harm reduction group, so we accept people that are past users and current users as well. It doesn't have to be that you have to be sober for a certain amount of time to join our group. It's nothing like that. It's just, do you have something that you can give to the group? You know, are you in a position, because some people, if you're homeless, and we actually have people that are homeless that provide so much to the group that I just don't even know how they do it. Honestly, I have a house and I can't get as much done as this person can, but a good percentage, probably 75% of us are still active users in the community, because we're harm reduction. It's about not necessarily focusing on being clean the next day, even the word being clean. And you guys might even see it differently, like from Spain, Portugal. It might be a little bit different legal-wise from Canada. But right now we're in the process, hopefully, of going towards a decriminalization point of view in Canada right now, and that's what we're backing, that whole agenda.
Okay, thanks.
I think there was another question back there.
Thank you for sharing your stories, especially to a room full of strangers. My question is more asking advice. Many of us work with texts that deal with Indigenous life stories in urban spaces, substance abuse, difficult motherhood. What kind of advice would you have for a PhD student approaching these kinds of texts as a white settler, as a European scholar? What kind of mindset, what kind of attitudes, what kind of how do we keep it ethical? I don't know.
Humility.
I know that's something that I certainly, because of my work as a theater artist and wanting to be authentic with the stories, it's about relationship. And so if you're only dealing with the texts as texts, I suppose, like the humility and kind of like those stories are authentic and not dismissing what those stories are. If you don't have any connection with the author, like how can you make connection with that author or that writer to be able to find ways to share, I guess. It's a relationship.
Creating a relationship.
Yeah.
And
Could I ask, is there any possibility within your research to involve the original sort of creator of that text, the person that was interviewed?
I would very much like to, yeah. I think it's a matter of funding and traveling, but that's, my intentions, hopefully. Someday sit down and talk with them.
I don't know the basis of it, but we're just trying to work out we have a research sort of angle group as well, and we're trying to figure out some of the details of ethically, engaging with people as well. So.
Yeah, personal. How can you have a personal relationship if it's not face to face? Yeah.
Yeah.
So when the
difficult.
Spanish reader, when our European readers encounter these texts in our bookstores, in our libraries, in our university, our students are encountering these texts. and those kinds of face-to-face relationships are not possible, how do we, I don't know, what is an alternative?
Because all I can see is that I just would say, because you probably see it yourself, the warning there is like, just the same as when you text somebody on the phone and it gets misinterpreted.
Yeah.
That's just a little snippet of a few words.
Yeah.
Now take a complex subject and take body language and all of that out of it. You don't see the person, how they're speaking, how they're saying it, all that, and it's being turned into text. It sounds like you're going to be missing a lot of your data, actually.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Should we take one more? I think Anna had a question, and then maybe we should move on so our other speakers have a chance to talk.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to start with Marie's comment at the very beginning when you said that for you the term or the concept of resilience is frustrating, and I think this speaks of the ambivalence of the concept, right? That it is frustrating when you're expected to be resilient, I guess, but I'd like you to elaborate a little bit more on that. And at the same time, you have become resilient through the use of story writing, storytelling, sharing your story. And I really liked what Jody said, even when explaining the name of your organization, the relationality of it, this watch each other's back, right? Help each other by sharing your stories and by giving others that which maybe you even think you don't have, but you do. So I really love that because those are central concepts that we are trying to deal with. Relationality at the core of resilience. So it was just a comment and how happy I am, talking about happiness, that you are bringing all these subjects that we deal with in a very theoretical framework when we analyze texts and when we write our own pieces. But here they come from your real experience, so it's very touching. Ms. Marie, if you want to elaborate a little bit on the frustrating part of how you envision resilience.
I'm frustrated and I'm also grateful that I survived, right? So there's both of those things there. My understanding of resilience is to endure hardship and bounce back. And over the years, bounce back implies that I'm the same, but I am not the same. Who I am has been forever. I am a different person than if I had not endured the things that I endured. So I wasn't resilient so much as I was coping. And if you use that different language, it doesn't sound so happy anymore. It just sounds like someone was coping for 16 years, right? Yes, humans are really hardy. We survive and we survive and we survive, but I think there's a lot more out there than just surviving. And I think that there's ways to make change to make that accessible to everybody, not just people that have access to things.
There's so much we can talk about that we even have other speakers, so thank you so much for your And let's just move straight on to Klyde. Klyde and then Aaron, and if the three of you are okay with just speaking one after another, we're really keen to hear what you have to say.
Okay, so as a poet, then I focus on poetry and what it offers as a source of sustenance. So in terms of the word resilient, these two words. So again, as a poet, then especially the type of poet I am, which is a dubpoet, D-U-B, and a lot of the words that the meanings that are related to that word dub holds true for this type of poetry. So semantic specificity is one of the things we really focus on, especially because the type of poetry that we do is inherently challenging official narratives and discourses, because it is the only genre in English literatures, in the field of Anglophone literatures, in which the aesthetics are determined by black people. And there are a lot of tensions around that within academia, which we don't have the time to get into. But because of that now, as a dub poet, I look at resilience and sustenance, and I say, well, they're so wide and big and slippery, I have to focus, I have to pinpoint. So I am going to talk about how I find poetry to be an ideal source of emotional balance and psychological sustenance, not economic or financial sustenance. So that's why I say we have to pinpoint the sustenances and the resiliences, you know, because we can get caught up in this wide term, resilience, sustenance, and we do a lot of nice sounding things, but what am I actually trying to conceptualize, to encapsulate as an idea? And that idea is that poetry provides this core central source of first psychological centering. So I'm focusing on my poem, I'm focusing on what, for me personally, so I'm using a personal experience. The only thing that would make me feel like totally lost, and what was, somebody used a phrase which I really like, a sense of spiritual death, is to not be able to interact with poetry and to feel it and to create it and to deliver it. And so that's my source. And I'm saying that I find it to be even more vital to someone who has very little, because it does not even need any supplies like visual arts in the beginning. So I don't have to buy anything, no one has to give me anything. I just have to come up with this idea that I'm trying to frame my words in a way that, first of all, journalize my dramas and traumas, and then presents them in a way that makes my ordinary thing become a sort of extraordinary phenomenological cultural statement on ways of being within my society and how our values are and how we distribute or maldistribute power, how we view things. And then, because so much I'm trying to say in so little time, I want to also say that what the poetry does, this form of poetry does, especially, specifically, through using call and response as a device, like, you know, say after me, hey, 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 we're feeling good in the neighborhood, let's hear you now, you know, blah, 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 yeah. And we got a vibe going. What I'm saying, I found over the years that creates a thing that I call a sense of community soul. And what interacting and working with CCENA has helped me to do is to define this idea of community soul. I'm working with my phone here, so I'm trying to. So within this idea of community soul, I'm going to finally now present a poem called Ode to the Bamboo, and saying that the bamboo the cluster, the clump of bamboo, is a metaphor for a creative community, for resilience. And I am positing that the way I deliver the poem will help to make you believe what I am saying. And that is the nature of dub poetry, and that is why it is so useful. So before I go into the poem now, I'm going into the conceptual territory of community soul. So I'm holding that this is a Brooksian theory, right? I don't have any PhD or anything, but I don't have any letters behind my name, but I think I have a lot inside my head. So, community soul is the aggregate sum of sentiment contained in a shared sense of belonging that links a group of people despite diverse ethnic characteristics, varying social statuses, differing perspectives, separate geographical and emotional locations, and variations in levels of education. And I'm saying that this is what I have found from spoken word or dub poetry gatherings, slams, poetry reading, where you have this kind of energy that is generated by the poetry that I call community soul. And the notion of community soul is built on my belief that soul is the common factor which links individuals to each other, and that a sense of shared soul essentially defines what a community is. So, in respect of the COVID experience, what I got then was a sense of divided community soul around the issues generated by COVID concerns and protocols, and whether it was conspiracy theories and that. So, you know, that's just a glimpse. And in terms of how this kind of language and radical reimagining of things through language via poetry helps. For example, I advance the argument that we should not have a black community in Hamilton. That linguistically, that is the beginning of othering, saying black community. We should have black members of the Hamilton community. And I believe this is where poets and poetry, especially the type that we do, which practices poetry as social communion, helps a society to reimagine itself and to realign power relationships. Ode to the bamboo. I often wish I were like you, bamboo, bamboo, grass, existing as trees, swishing your swaying choreographies. No preferences to please, and no shoes to squeeze you, bamboo, bamboo, rooted in circumstance, romancing chance you breathe to dance, bamboo, bamboo, serenity is the song you sing, in tune with everything, sunshine or rain, you never complain, no matter what strain, even if creaking or squeaking, bamboo, bamboo, no sigh of pain from you, only soothing susurrances sprinkled on wind, serenading, listening. No moaning, no groaning, no fears of axe in morning, no tears of flames in evening, bamboo, bamboo. Oh, look at you, just another clump of bamboo, bamboo grass, existing as trees, sharing joint identities, minus unease, weathering vagaries of breeze, bamboo, bamboo. Midnight or noon, you sing the same tune, and soon maybe you could get cut down, carved, painted, sold downtown. Bamboo, bamboo, but you never look blue, and nothing ever seems to bother you. Bamboo, bamboo, who can tell what you would tell if you could tell these things I think I hear from you, a mere clump of bamboo, bamboo, grass existing as trees, swishing, swaying, sashaying, portraying your scintillating choreographies. Are you convinced?
My name is Parry. I appreciate that Daniel used such beautiful and specific words to explain what I do, because my actual job title is graduation coach, which makes little to no sense because it just sounds like I make graduations. That's not what I do. Yeah, but I work and live in Hamilton, born and raised here. Yeah, so through CCENA, I created the Hamilton Black History Database, and it's essentially a website that houses information on any in-person or digital archive materials that relate to the Black experience in Hamilton from as early as the 1600s up until about 2 months ago. I update it every month, so by next week it could be up till tomorrow. I'm not really sure, it depends on what happens, but yeah, so that's something that I did, and for me it was very, very uplifting, very important to me, and I think that it's kind of a stepping stone for what I'm going to talk about today, because through a lot of my work, I do work in the Black community. I specifically work a lot with youth these days, but originally I started out, you know, as a lot of folks do, tackling, talking about issues, systemic issues, obviously stuff like anti-Blackness, and for me it was, best word I can use was emotionally taxing. It's a lot. It's a lot to live, it's a lot to talk about, and it's a lot to just constantly be experiencing and be in your mind. And I think that the project that I worked on through the database forced me to deal with the dual reckoning of always living in a Black body, but having to uplift the good and the bad, having to honor the lives of our ancestors and people in the past who've experienced anti-Blackness, who've experienced incredible injustices, as well as the fact that this is still going on today, but also making room for the good stuff, the amazing feats, the amazing culture and history that we bring to the table, especially in Hamilton. And I think that that's something that has continued with me going forward. So currently I work as a graduation coach for Black students at a high school in Hamilton. Pretty much what that means is I'm a big brother to a bunch of kids. So I show up to the school every day. I'm about 24. Sometimes people think I'm 18, but I'm graduating. I literally mean at the school. Like, this is what I experience. I will literally have kids being like, so what, where are you going next year? I'm like, hopefully nowhere. That'll kick me out. But yeah, so I pretty much show up every day and provide support to grade 9 to 12 Black students and a lot of other students of varying identities. So I'm pretty much there to help them in any way, shape, or form. So that includes me helping if a kid's failing a class, if they're struggling with getting to graduation, they're wondering what they want to do after high school, if they're having dating issues, literally anything, which has its good and bad side. But yeah, it's an amazing opportunity to actually work with youth, and you're doing a lot of stuff that you would have needed when you were that age. And I think that for me, a lot of that includes tackling the hard issues. We're living in a society where at the school, and a lot of the schools in Hamilton, it's predominantly white staff and predominantly white students. So I am dealing with a lot of these students who are dealing with experiences of racism, experiences of discrimination, and not only are they being not acknowledged in terms of action, in terms of justice, but they're sometimes being so pressed down to the fact that these kids don't even understand that what they're experiencing is wrong, or that it's not normal, or that they shouldn't have to feel this way. And I think that something that was said that was really beautiful that definitely stuck with me was the idea that we shouldn't have to be resilient all the time. And I find myself, and I find a lot of my kids, you know, getting angry to the point of screaming, getting sad to the point of crying at the fact that we have to continually be beaten down and get back up the next day, go to work, go to school, pretend like it didn't happen. Because if we don't, we know what's going to happen. We're going to start failing our classes, we're going to get fired at work, and stuff like that happens. And it's sad that we grow up, and I think that a lot of us can speak to the fact that you get to around between 8 or 12 and your parents tell you this. As a black person, you learn very early that this is just how the world works. That's usually what's said. This is just how it is. This is the system we're living in. And I think that for me, I can understand living this through a lot of my life, and I learned to deal with that. But I think the extra step was seeing youth going through this, seeing kids who are as old as 19 and as young as 14 dealing with this on a daily basis. Kids who are not only being mistreated by their peers, but who are being mistreated by adults in the building. Me, as someone who's 24, is resonating with the feelings of a 16-year-old while watching them being abused by a 44-year-old. And there's something that's, I don't even know what the right word for that is, so I'm just gonna leave it at that because I can't even put that into one word. But I think for me, as someone who's doing a lot of support for students and who's working with these kids every day, talking to them, I found that we needed to have a balance because we were constantly just talking about the hard stuff. And it was important because they needed to get it out, but then it started becoming a negative association with my room. It started being, this is just where we talk about trauma, this is just where we talk about issues. So I decided that we needed to find ways to celebrate Black joy, because Black joy in the face of anti-Blackness is one of the most beautiful things in the world. And I started doing programs here and there and infusing into everything, but the basis of it was honestly just finding a balance of the good and the bad. Finding a balance of allowing youth and allowing me to talk about these issues in a serious way and being able to actually unpack these things and teach them that it's okay to talk about these things. It's okay to, it's okay to be not okay, but it's okay to actually be sad, be hurt, be feeling these things, and it's going to take time to move through them. And I think that it was a blessing for me to actually impart these lessons onto youth, impart it as early as 13 or 14, the time when I didn't even realize that these things were wrong. I think that for me, I got to about second year of university when I realized that everything that happened in high school shouldn't have happened to me, and that it wasn't just me experiencing these things because I did something wrong. It was because of the systems we're living in, because of the lack of care we have adults taking towards children. And so my first thought was, let's put on a Disney movie. And honestly, it worked. Over time it worked, but immediately the biggest thing for me was that there was a lot of emotional resistance in the kids to do this. And it wasn't that they were like, no, we don't want this for kids, but it was just discomfort. There was a lot of discomfort towards them just being happy, enjoying themselves, because they've gotten so used to anytime Black students or racialized students are together in the school, something bad is happening. That was the constant association, is that that's not a point of joy, that is a point of danger, concern, or they're being brought together as a focus group to talk about racism and then nothing's going to happen. And yeah, I think that for them, it was very much something that, they kept saying, well, Black students don't want to do that, sir. Oh, we don't want to do that, sir, blah, blah, blah. And I honestly just kept asking until I found one student who wanted to do it, and I started from there. And I would do it every single week. I would not show the same Disney movie every week. That's if I'm working with 4-year-olds or something. But yeah, I would switch it up. I would do some weeks we're doing coloring, but I'm honestly just working with what we've got. I didn't have that much money in the budget, so it's me going to Walmart at night and finding the cheapest stuff that we can do, that they can find joy in. And so sometimes it was us doing coloring. Sometimes one of the things that sticks out is one of the kids decided that we would have a group discussion on the funniest item that our mom spanked us with as children, because that's what they wanted to do. That's what they wanted to do, and it was in some ways beautiful, and that's a whole other conversation that we can have. But yeah, it's beautiful because I was creating a space where the kids could be talking about serious things, but they could also just do what they wanted to do, and it was amazing because I had the opportunity to watch these kids grow, not only becoming more comfortable living in joy, not feeling guilty about that, but having their own ideas to do things. I had kids who wanted to plan things like an anime day where they're watching anime all day because that's what brings them joy. And I think that over time, it became just as important as talking about the serious stuff, because I, as someone who's gone through burnout several times, killed me thinking about it happening to any of those kids, because those are my kids. They're like my little cousins, my little brothers and sisters and siblings, and it ate me up inside, it eats me up inside anytime I'm in the community and I'm working with even younger kids. We're like 4 to 12, and I'm thinking of them going down the same path as me, or going down an even worse path. And the saving grace is that I can actually be there to help in some way, shape, or form. That doesn't mean that I can fix the system in the night, or that I can completely fix everything and make sure they're okay. But for me, it is healing in itself, knowing that I'm doing something to prevent the same thing from happening, from history repeating itself. And I think that that's something that definitely came to me today in terms of talking about collective sustenance is, you know, like, we're constantly thinking about ways to survive. Just, we need to survive, we need to get through the night. And yeah, we need that, but I think that if we are only thinking about survival, what are we doing after that? You know, we need to get to a point where we can actually survive and thrive and have beautiful things, and we need to have something worth fighting for. We can't just be fighting for our lives, and obviously we've had to do it for a really long time, but we need to be fighting for something more. And I wanted, and I still want my students and my kids to, you know, find that balance of being able to tackle these issues, but also make space for Black joy, because I've seen it continually do just as good as, you know, tackling these serious issues. Doing activist work is incredibly important. I think that I'm doing one small part of that. There are folks who are on the streets every single day, you know, fighting for change in a myriad of ways. I can't even list all of them right now. And the amazing thing for me is that I can be a part of that in some small way, but also supplant that by doing the serious stuff, as well as, you know, making some kids smile. And if that's them watching The Princess and the Frog, a lot of people may not see the value in that, of showing a 16-year-old Princess and the Frog in the middle of the school week, but I do, and they do. And I think that that's been one of the most amazing things for me. And as someone who's 24 and does not plan on having children soon because I don't have the money or the means to, it's amazing to see it in the eyes of students, in the eyes of teenagers, because it keeps me going, and that's why I do the things I do. I cannot change a lot of the stuff I've dealt with in the past, but I can heal myself and hopefully develop a, what's the word? A room of, I guess, yeah, a room of healing in that way. That hopefully goes on forwards in our youth, and I think that that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
All right, so I don't have an original title for my presentation at all. It's just the theme of this talk, which is Everyday Collective Sustenance in Broken Times. I wanted to do my own land acknowledgement because I don't live in Hamilton. So I live in Bowmanville, which is under the municipality of Clarington, and it's situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas and Chippewas of the Anishinaabe, known today as the Williams Treaties First Nations. Our work on this land acknowledges their resilience and their long-standing contributions to the area now known as the municipality of Clarington. As a member of the African diaspora, I also recognize that we are stolen people on stolen land, and it remains our duty to be accomplices toward equity, reconciliation, and the fight for returning Indigenous land in pristine condition. The photo that I've included is by artist Sirius Marcus Ware, who's an activist and is profiling Indigenous iconography, and I first saw this October of last year at Nuit Blanche in Toronto. I want to start with some thank yous. So special thanks to Daniel, Susie, Janice. I thought Lorraine would be here. Seven Doug, Reese, my co-panelists, and a whole bunch of Black people who continue to make and remake me. I've included a quotation that I'll read. It goes like this. It's the biggest song in America. He's watching her as if he knew her, as if he had heard the stories that she does not tell anyone else. Is that how love looks from the outside, like admiration mixed with secret pain? When the song ends, Teacher Mark takes the guitar. This song was written by a blind Black man. It's about missing the place where you are from, he says. Sample leans in. It sounds like someone crying. Their music sounds like that, I tell him. So you'll notice in the top right corner some of my slides, some of my favorite albums, and who they're by, and I think that that's a bit of a companion piece to the ethos of that slide. Charles Bradley Changes, one of my favorites. Pauses for photos.
Thank you.
No problem. A little bit about me. My name is Ashley. I go by Ash. I'm an Aquarius. I'm as black as possible. I'm a first-generation Canadian by way of Jamaica, occupying space on Turtle Island. I'm an abolitionist, an artist, and I believe in anti-respectability. I think my last CCENA presentation, I was in a Tupac hoodie. This time it's like black women in hip-hop as comic book superheroes. I hold an MA in English that I got from McMaster in 2013, and a double major Bachelor's of Arts, also from McMaster, in English, Cultural Studies, and Critical Theory that I got in 2012. I'm a professor of communications at a college. I will give them no shine at all. About me, my research critiques how power, economics, and politics influence social change while advocating for imagination and creativity as alternatives to neoliberal market logics. My project does not perceive the city as a blank canvas upon which we can experiment, but rather aims to use collaborative measures to dissect and render visible the various social and material flows that both produce and reproduce hegemonic power structures and dismantle them with a focus on place-based pedagogy, which is all a way of saying I like geography and psychogeography and my praxis is in walking. So my first project with CCENA was funded in 2018 and it was called Homework. I don't live in Hamilton. I'm a plant, I went to school at McMaster, so it's not my home, but it is a place I did work, and I thought it was interesting that alma mater translates to nurturing mother, and it's a place that basically grew me. The premise of my first CCENA project was accepted to UC Berkeley's Urban Space in the Census Conference in 2020. I couldn't go because we were stuck in a Pontiac, but that's okay. The only reason I mention that is that's a quick way of understanding my work, like urban space and the census. So an excerpt from that says, psychogeography, redeploying Guy Debord's concept of dérivé to focus on how the lived experience of walking engages affect and sensibility in unique ways for racialized people. Colleague of mine, Dr. Kristen Shaw, and I argue that studies of space must place more emphasis on race and ethnicity, and that pedagogy focused on the experiences of racialized individuals and their senses of urban space is vital to help educate about the function and power and its effects on placemaking and identity construction. So you might have seen a lot of the stories that came out even prior to George Floyd of if you're a black man running, you can't do that. You can't be a black person wearing a hoodie in the city. You can't be a black person with your hands in your pockets. Everything you do is a threat. You've done something. You're not running to catch a bus. You're running because you're a criminal. You stole something. You're running away. You're not ever running, to work, anything like that. So my project is basically paying attention to how it feels to be in the system of hyper-surveillance as a black person, as a woman, as a racialized person, as a disabled person, as a gay person, etc. All these different identities, you experience space differently. Specifically a city, maybe also this idyllic farm, garden, away from technology space, you're still going to be racialized by that space, which I'll explain. As Alexandra Horowitz explains in her work On Looking, 11 Walks with Expert Eyes, there are two types of attention. The first is vigilance, instincts equipping us to fight or flight responses to threats in our surroundings. And the second is selective attention, unconsciously chosen stimuli that curates our experiences, what our individual biases prioritize as we observe. It is in the negative space of our surroundings, the seemingly inconspicuous, that vibrant life is burgeoning. It is a deliberate act to pay attention to it, and to it all. And while it is deliberate, it is also and simultaneously an act of leisure and rebellion. So, a text that I was reading called Queering Anarchism says, like the Zapatistas, I want to live in a world where many worlds fit. Where the river meets the bank, or forest meets the meadow, or sea the shore, there will be an abundance of life. The more that anarchism a many-branched river in our social ecosystem mixes and mingles with swamp and stone, soil and soul, the more diverse forms of life will benefit. So I don't believe in boundaries. I think boundaries are only real once they're politicized. Otherwise, no one is illegal. I am, however, interested in this idea of frontiers. I'm interested in this thing meeting this other thing and what potentials we can create in that liminal third space. And I think that happens a lot with culture and that overlap of different communities. If you're any of the academics in the room, you might be familiar with Fred Moten, and his thesis is simple. He says, resist. All the different ways that we can be commoditized and that our rebellion can be appropriated, do the opposite. Find a way of resistance. So from homework in 2018, I then started on Homegirl, my 2022 CCENA project. So in 2018, heavily influenced by white dudeness and French theory, French invasion, former Foucauldian, minor still Foucauldian. But the idea of the flaneur is an idler or a man of leisure, to wander, to stroll, to lounge, and flâneurie is to walk aimlessly or idly, which is basically a way of saying that like white men can walk the streets and not be carded. They get to just observe the city. They get to like sit in the coffee shop window and people watch and no one watches them back. Versus what I wanted to do, which is blaneuse. So like a black female who participates in the urban environment, if that makes any sense. So there has to be a way for other identities to also live, work, play, and engage with the city. Not in a way that we're not hyper-surveyed, because we will be racialized that way anyways, but the city is also for me. So homegirl is a noun, a young female acquaintance from one's own town or neighborhood, or from the same social background. I want to unpack the stigma of being a black person on a farm, because a lot of the time that is seen as akin to slavery, or being pedestrian, peasantry, and poverty. I think that there's a way that we can exist as black people in nature, growing our own food, and it's a way of living off the grid, and it's not seen as negative or repressive because we already outgrew that. We got off the plantations. Why are you going back? We have to have our own food systems. Like, we have to understand our own ways of sustenance every day in a way that Galen Weston doesn't get a cut, right? Like, there has to be a way that, like, Rogers goes down and we're okay, if that makes any sense. And I think that is both personal and collective as an experience that's fruitful for black people. And every time I kind of give this presentation, and I was hoping black people would be in the audience, shucks. But I always ask the question, what are black people dreaming about? And I got this idea from page 7 of Robin D.G. Kelly's book, Freedom Dreams. That is the best introduction of any academic text I've ever read. And I think it's important to question and ask and ponder and really politically pry into what black people's dreams are. So much of what Aaron was saying, like, there has to be something after this. Like, it's fine to fight for this, to make it to the next day. What happens next, or what happens after that? And if there were black people in the audience, I would challenge them to state your dreams in the affirmative, rather than the negative. Because every time I ask this question, I'm always responded to with, I just dream of not being oppressed. I just dream of not prisons. I dream of not racism. We know those things exist. Show me what happens after that. So I challenge your dreams to be in the affirmative. And that's a different sound. If you're familiar with biomimicry, or the idea of nature giving us metaphors that we can live by to solve human or social problems, you might recognize this idea of like the rhizome, which is something I try to do in my work. So a rhizome, also called creeping rootstock, is a horizontal underground plant stem capable of producing the shoot and root systems of a new plant. An example of a rhizome is ginger. So you can break it off anywhere and it will regrow from that broken place. I think cities should be like that. I think communities should be like that. Revolution, resistance, radical work should be like that. I think that a lot of what we do should be just under the system enough that it's undetectable, and if one snaps off, like it doesn't end. It keeps going, it keeps growing, and it reproduces itself. So this is my metaphor for how I think sustenance and radicality and resistance might happen. And with that, I'm going to introduce to you 3 different modes of sustenance. The first one being Afrofuturism, which I think is the one you might have heard the most about, which implies the future of Black people, or that Black people do have a future. I don't consider myself an Afrofuturist, although I do support it. Missy Elliott is one of my favorite artists. Octavia E. Butler is one of the best science fiction authors I've ever read. You might have seen the Disney Marvel movie Black Panther, which is actually, I don't consider it Afrofuturism because it's just Civil War, which we've seen before. And I don't consider myself an Afrofuturist because there's still this like colonial impetus towards science, and I don't want to have to do the labor of mining vibranium for freedom. Like, I don't want to do it, right? So Afrofuturism is in art, it's in music, in movies, in style, it's in pop culture, but it's also in our thinking and our ethos. The next one is Afro-pessimism, and I kind of lean this way. And the blunt or crude way of explaining Afro-pessimism is an understanding and acceptance that the system will absolutely kill you. Like, there's no way out. You are in a hostage situation. So what do you do with your time, knowing they will get you? And I say that because there was this idea that if you have the right education, if you speak correctly, and you don't sag your pants, you wear the right business suit or whatever, then like white supremacy won't kill you. They still killed Martin Luther King. He was the correct religion, he was the correct economic background, wasn't free, wasn't safe, right? Same thing with Tupac. He died at 26 years old, and everything he did in his life leading up to that was like fight the power, free the people, like fight the system. Right, so some of the examples that I have are Tupac from hip hop, Malcolm X. I was at L. Jones' book launch. This is an amazing book, particularly chapter 7. It's on abolitionist intimacies. And then one of my good friends, Desmond Cole, for those of you who are not in a Canadian context, he's a very, very good Toronto-based journalist. And his book won, I don't even know, several big prizes of things. And it basically is profiling his existence as a Black man in the city of Toronto in a single year, all of the different ways that he was racialized in the city. The reason I have these examples here is I believe these ethos, the ideology behind them to be an understanding there's no way out. It already took 400 years to get here. We're not seeing the end of this. What do we do with our time in the meantime? That's Afro-pessimism. So I lean this way. I think this is the most radical thing, but I have like Afro bubblegum rising. So Afro bubblegum is a belief in fun, fierce, and frivolous representations of Africa and its diaspora. To that end, we work to curate, commission, and create fun work that celebrates joy. We are storytellers, clothes makers, graphic designers, musicians, lovers of life, joy harbingers, beauty mongers, hope sayers, etc., etc. Okay, so this is basically goes away from the stereotype of like Black people having to be like strong and like resilient and like, nah, I'm gonna enjoy myself. And that's also an act of resistance, and that's also an act of rebellion, and that's also an act of like fight the power. So, title of my mixtape, The Black Mundane is Radical, right? So there's this idea of like taking a nap, smoking your weed, having your flowers, like coloring your hair, all of these things that don't have any economic, it doesn't pay you anything, it doesn't do anything, that's still powerful, do that. Okay, so I think that it's different for a Black person to take a nap because our leisure and our downtime has been racialized away from us, so much so that like, that relaxing, that's for like that class of people. You should have a job and then a side job and then raise your kids and like hustle harder. We are not encouraged to like put our feet up. So when a Black person does it, I'm like, that is political. Okay, so again, if there are Black people in the room, I'd ask, what would you do more of if you had all the time in the world? So it's Toni Morrison, another author, who says that racism is a distraction. So they tell you that you have the wrong skull shape, and you spend 100 years proving you do have the right skull shape. You are smart, you can learn. And then they tell you you're not smart, you're not strong, you're not any of these things, you can't ever be a president, and you spend another 100 years proving that you can. What would you do without that messaging? Would you garden? Would you hang out with your friends? Would you dance? Would you sing? Would you laugh? Afro Bubblegum says do that. So there's another term by Robin D.G. Kelley that's called infra-political. So infra as in like infrared, as in it's just under the system enough that it's difficult to detect, kind of like a rhizome. So his example in this text is when black women and black men working side by side were packing tobacco, the black women couldn't pack it as tightly, and so they would get punished. So the black men would start packing the tobacco less tightly, so now they couldn't tell who was doing it. No one gets punished. And no one can like detect, like, why is it suddenly loose? Like, you can't tell. Another example that he gives is like when black women are hired into white households to do domestic work, such as laundry, those black women would bring their own household laundry to those white houses and mix the laundry in, and like just like take your money and your time to do my own laundry, right? So all of that is in a way that the system can't detect it, and you're just doing your own chores. You're doing your own work. You're doing labor in a way that's infrapolitical. So I'm not an activist. I think that a lot of activism is ablecentric and requires me to put my body between the police and my community. I'm not doing it. I'm over it. I'm over being an activist. I also don't identify as a feminist. I think that a lot of feminism is capitalist and transphobic. I think it's a lot of unpaid labor, and so I don't want to do it. So if my radical blackness can engage in guerrilla gardening, breaking bread with other women or non-binary, gender non-conforming folks, that's where I want to be. I don't want to be in the streets yelling. I don't want to be like crafting my signs and like the police nab me and now I'm in jail. I'm done doing that. Like, I've done it. And now I want to find other ways of restorative political actions that can't be like appropriated by whiteness, get me fired, or like put me in danger. So how do we rebel against system in ways that are impactful and imperceptible to those systems and cannot be appropriated by race-based capitalism? In other words, Afro Bubblegum helps us or asks us, how do we make it to old age? How do we not burn out? How do we not die at 26? So my answer to that is take black naps, grow black food, so which isn't just like culturally appropriate, but like the act of us farming has a different political mythos or like ethos to it. Have fun, queer black times, be alive, stay alive, not doing labor. Our rested bodies are the bigger threat. Our full hearts are the bigger threat. Black rage will free us all, but the black mundane will free ourselves. So how do we decolonize leisure? If you want further reading on this, Butter, Honey, Pig Bread is one of the best books that I read last year. I call it bubblegum and not Afro bubblegum because 3 of these authors are black, but this author is indigenous. And it's not about like, la la la, I'm dancing and having fun. Like, it's still politicizing how reading fiction is different when your labor has been commoditized differently. Pleasure activism, I suggest if you're doing any organizing or anything community facing, like that book is brilliant. It's the second book in the series. The first book is called Emergent Strategy, which I also highly recommend. And then Honey and Spice is like black people just being alive and happy. Because we're still at the tail end of Gay Pride Month, I wanted to shout out some of my favorite black queer theorists, Audre Lorde and James Baldwin, which is my favorite prayer candle. For sale nowhere, this is mine. Audre Lorde says, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. That's bubblegum. Any real change implies the breakup of the world as one has already known it. The less of all that gave one an identity, the end of safety. So I think that that's especially different when you're a black man. Like, when you accept the end of your safety, something has to come after that. And I think that he's aware. So like, he might be a pessimist with a bubblegum future in mind. That's my presentation. Thank you so much.
Speaking of, we had bamboo swishing and swaying. We had black joy in the midst of, school politics and youth culture. And we've got bubblegum. Thank you for these presentations.
You were listening.
So, people's questions or comments or thoughts that you've had since you had a few words to say, you've heard each other speak a little bit. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Sorry, me again. I remember when you sent this prompt, or maybe this was a conversation we've had ongoing via Zoom for a very long time. But I think it's important to remember that resilience has been like co-opted by capitalism as like a thing that's good, right? So it's this idea that we should like make school harder and make jobs like minimum wage shouldn't go up so that you're resilient. Like it's not a thing that we're like tapping into to get over. It's a thing that's imposed on us a lot of the time, and then it becomes this phrase that blames us for our own poverty or like blackness. And like that's an interesting thing. I think resilience is one thing if I say I'm a resilient person, and I think it's different or it sounds different when someone else is like, why aren't you being resilient? Look at the systems. Does that make sense? That's it. That's all I wanted to add. There's no slide for that. So
what I want to add is that in the practice of dub poetry, we view the very act of doing your poetry, performing it, as graduating from resistance to deliverance. So the argument is like resistance was for the slaves, frankly. So it was resistance that caused chattel slavery to be transformed to wage slavery. And that is the underlying discourse that the Africans were brought to work for free. But then they forced the system to pay them. And so it was graduated from chattel slavery to wage slavery. And then capitalism came in and said, oh, I liberated the slaves, and now makes wage slavery available to all races without telling anybody. And that is a trick to resilience. The slave had to employ resilience as resistance. In the free space, we, as marginalized or oppressed, or people who have been dispossessed or disenfranchised, have to now view resilience as self-deliverance. Otherwise, we'll always be the children of Sisyphus, pushing that thing up the hill and watching it roll back. And that is the pessimism related to the semantics of resilience. What does resilience mean to whom? And why do I have to be resilient if whenever I push that ball up there, you're going to roll it back down and say, oh, be more resilient. Now we have to graduate from resisting to find a way to deliver ourselves from that paradigm of the ball rolling back down the hill. And that is where collective creativity works. And I love the model that Keeping Six has. And I know it works in the community. I'm pleased to say that I was invited to Keeping Six event just by being who I am. I interacted with somebody who's called a street person, and like we just met as people, and we were talking like, yeah man, yo, win this thing, and you know, I'm an I, you know, yeah. I said, oh, you sound like somebody, who are you? I said, I'm a poet. They said, oh, there's this poetry thing. And then I went to this poetry thing, and I'm so excited, they had to tell me, oh, I can't do any more poetry. I'm so happy, just wanted to share because people are loving the stuff. And then I'm about to leave with just the joy of having done the poem being loved. And then I get paid. Yeah, it was like a real beautiful occasion. So, you know, these things kind of interlink within the community. It's beautiful, as you said.
Is it okay? Can I comment on, is it you and your nephew? Is that your uncle and nephew?
No.
He just called me. Because it's kind of about what both of you said. It's about resiliency, and you said like the myth of Sisyphus pushing, and what you also said, you touched on something that I wanted to speak on, but it was just in the back of my mind about. I think the most noble thing that we can do is I work with a lot of people who have mental issues and substance problems, and there's the generational aspect of trauma, like that keeps on going. When your father has this thing and then they beat the kids and then it keeps going and stuff, the most noble thing that you can do is somehow escape that cycle of trauma and trying to push that thing up the hill. That's like maybe we got to do something different, different. Yeah. But that escape that generational trauma, and it's not easy. Either like our parents pass all sorts of crap down to us, and it's unfortunately it just happens because they had difficult lives. Potentially not everybody has the best perfect life, and nobody's the perfect parents. So I think really the strongest people, if you're strong enough, that's what we need to do, is not put it down to the next generation or not put it out there into the community. If you don't have kids, just don't put it into the community at large. That's all. I just wanted to say.
And I think it ties in with the Black joy as well, like when you're talking about, like, it's like how do you, it's like celebrating things instead of always kind of going, oh, these are the things. It's like, how can you celebrate that, bring that out to the world?
Yeah, honestly, it's very true, and I like what you said about generational trauma, because it's, I have my own, I think we all have our own stuff there, and I think that, for me, I'm only 24, but I spent a lot of my teens being that angry kid who was just angry at everything, and I didn't, you try and have an outlet for a lot of that, but
when you're young, you don't even know why sometimes, right? You just have that because of your family kind of builds it into you, and when you're young, you don't even know why, you're just angry.
100%, yeah.
It takes time.
Yeah, it takes time, and it's hard having that anger, but once you get to a point where you are saying, okay, I'm not going to spend all of my time being angry, you kind of feel like you have nothing there. And when I started working with youth, it was tough because I was like, okay, I can't be angry with you guys because that would be weird because you're like kids. And it's like, what do I supplant that with? Like I can only talk about stuff that upsets you for so long, and if I do that, I'm becoming your therapist, which is above my pay grade. And I do not have the skills to do that. It's a tough decision, and it's tough to think about that because I don't have kids at all. I just have little nieces and nephews and kids in the community. But I got to a point where I had to think, same thing, like what do I want to pass? What do I want to put back into the community? Because obviously I can be there when we're talking about the bad stuff, but I don't only want to be invited to the table when we're tackling the hard stuff. I want to be there when we're having fun, when the kids are laughing, when we're having good times, and I had to find some way to fit into that, bring my own interests. A lot of that is stuff like, Afrofuturism and, meeting kids where they're at, finding stuff that they're interested in, because obviously I did not want to just sit down watching a Disney movie I've seen like hundreds of times. But, you see that it's something that brings joy to kids, and it's a lot of it was me meeting them where they're at, but it's, in some ways, I'm doing something that would on my own bring me zero joy, but seeing it bringing something to them creates Black joy,
We had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to riff a little bit on what Jody said. Like, when we use the word intergenerational, like people often talk about families, but Erin, as you were speaking about the educators, I was thinking about how like successive generations of these like academic bureaucrats are like causing harm to kids. So I just wanted to commend you for what you're doing to interrupt that and like buffer the kids, but also to validate that like you shouldn't have to do that, and it sounds super hazardous.
Yeah, it's honestly like the scariest thing for me was I had my own experiences in high school, but seeing it as an adult with kids, and it's adults who are much older than you, and seeing just a complete lack of like, you've been doing this for 20 years and you're not even acknowledging the fact that this is going to stick with the kid for the next 20 years or the rest of their life. And you know, that's a big thing, you know, when we're doing community work, that's something that you need to constantly be thinking of, because obviously if I'm in the room with, you know, 20-year-olds or 30-year-olds, there's a lot of stuff that I can do that's just going to, okay, I'm gonna forget about it tomorrow. But with teenagers, you know, they're like glue. Stuff like that sticks to them. Like you could say one rude comment. I had a lot of kids who would come to me and they'd have things that their teacher said to them or jokes that they made, and the way that they were talking about and the way that I could see it in their eyes, I knew that it was gonna stick with them for years. And even if I say a million things to kind of rewrite that and be like, well, that's not true because of this, and you shouldn't think that because of this, and because you're beautiful in this way, and blah, blah, blah. I know that I can't rewire their brain to never have heard that again. And it kills me thinking about that. And it's obviously you can do so much work to kind of heal after that, but the problem is we shouldn't have to be healing from that. We shouldn't have to be resilient. And obviously, you know, it's,
there shouldn't be that kind of negativity in the educational system.
It's true.
Now, I don't know if it's changed since I was there, but I had a lot of negativity that I had to work through. And it bothered me that I found out that the critical thinking is not taught until college level.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
We have a lot of adults who aren't even practicing, you know.
Yeah, it's an optional as a college level. So it's like, what are we doing? Why isn't critical thinking anyway?
Yeah, I don't know. I completely agree. It's
I see there's a question from
Sorry.
Emily here.
Yeah,
But can I just say something this is a very urgent thing to say. The bar closes at 9, and you know we're talking about certain kinds of pleasures and things that are very important for the way in which we engage with the world. So can we take one last comment, and then maybe we can speak more informally so that people can get a chance to get something to drink, and there's food over here, and we can speak around the room rather than in kind of forum like that. So.
Yeah, it's about the educational system that has just been mentioned here. Aaron mentioned that it wasn't until you were in university that you realized that what you had lived through while at school was not normal. Okay, the normalization of racism and racialization. So I was wondering whether it was the university that made you think otherwise, or was just the process of growing up and by chance you were at the university?
Yeah, I think it was a mixture, because obviously I'm getting to be about 21 and I'm in a completely different space, you know, where I'm not dealing with such a severe power dynamic of there's an adult in the room and I have to adhere to everything they say. You know, university is, you can disagree with your prof, they can give you a bad grade, but like they can't kick you out, they can't, you know, they can't completely destroy you emotionally in that same way that a high school teacher can. I think that, yeah, for me, I was taking a minor in Black history, I was majoring in Indigenous studies, so I was learning the roots of things and going, oh, okay. So like, you know, you hear people talk in class and like, this is wrong, you go, yeah, it is, and you're thinking of your own stuff, but.
Happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, sometimes we professors like to think that we're doing something important.
Yeah.
That we are also delivering, you know, giving
Yeah.
back to society, making people think.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, okay, all this theory, it's just there.
Yeah.
But seeing that it has a real impact on.
Yeah, yes, I think that is one of the most amazing things about being Black in post-secondary, is that, you know, a lot of the stuff that's theorized and people can just talk about all day is our real life experiences, you know, and it can help us actually unpack what we're dealing with, and just as well as being in the classroom helped me, you know, doing work in the Black community around McMaster, you know, I'm talking to student leaders and we're talking about stuff that's going on at school, we're talking about our past and stuff, because I grew up in a very homogenous white town, so that did not help things at all in terms of unpacking stuff. But yeah, it was a blessing that university was the space where I could kind of become an adult, but also, you know, absorb everything and accept that I'm not just learning stuff and writing papers, that this actually can impact my way of thinking.